But I want to talk about the measures that Iceland is going through in order to ensure that men and women have equal pay. And I think that there are lessons to be learned from this. So I'm just going to read, this is according to the New York Times. Iceland this week began putting in place a new law that requires companies and government agencies to prove that they are paying men and women equally. Pause. The best example would be, the most recent example would be Hoda, I don't know her last name, and Matt Lauer. Matt Lauer was making $13 million a year. Hoda's making now $7 million a year to replace him. Now, I know we're honestly talking about a level of elitism where it really doesn't matter. I mean, hell, pay me $1 million a year. I would not care if the person next to me is making $5. Pay me $1 million and we're good. But it just kind of demonstrates the imbalance that there is between men and women. And of course, there's data that bears this out. And there was a tweet chain over the holidays where a woman said, if you know that your coworker is, oh no, she said to the men, tweet out what you're making and in your position so that your coworkers can see if they're making, and it really exposed how imbalanced this thing really is. Those are just anecdotes, but there's actual data that backs this up, and Iceland has gone one step further. The Equal Pay Standard Act, companies with according to the New York Times, companies with 25 full-time employees or more must analyze their salary structures every 3 years to ensure that men and women are being paid the same amount for doing the same jobs. The New York Times continues, certification needed from the government or business will face fines. So there's actually a penalty that if you don't get this certification, that you will be fined for not being compliant with this law. In terms of the context of Iceland and gender in general, women earn 14 to 20% less than men, according to government data for 2015. In 2016, women accounted for 48% of the elected representatives in Iceland's parliament. Men were offered parental leave equal to women. I've got a baby on the way. That would be great. Icelandic law since 2013 requires private companies with more than 50 employees to have at least 40% women or men. The one in there that's nestled in there is that I think we need to address head on would be the representation, right? Women are what, 51, 52% of America, and I think they represent 20% of the House. I might have my numbers wrong. But they are not equally represented in Congress. And so there is a need to have women who have our politics, clearly, right? And so this is not just a blanket saying just any woman would do, but for a long time, any man would do because it was all men in the first place. So I think as a United States, as a matter of what should just be done, particularly with the Democratic Party and leftists, is that we should be running the hell out of women to bring this into balance and to make sure that we bring it into balance with people whose politics are beneficial to women versus running women whose politics are detrimental to women, right? So we can both simultaneously address gender as well as everything else, right? It doesn't have to be a blanket. It can be very specific. Run women, yes, but run women who are going to help women instead of hurt women. And I'm trying to remember that quote from my homegirl, Anoa. She said, corporate feminism does not trickle down. I will never forget that quote she said about 2 years ago, speaking of just having representation in corporate America does not help women across the board. Same thing politically. It does not trickle down. So there is an opportunity, but there's not a shortage. Here's the thing. There's an opportunity because there's not a shortage of radical women who have politics that are beneficial to marginalized women and marginalized communities in general. There's not a shortage. I just got through listening to a podcast this morning from Left Pocket, POC, People of Color Pocket podcast. And I'm just listening to the brilliance of the host as well as the guest. And I'm like, and both of them are women, there's never going to be a shortage of dynamic women who can get the job done. What there usually is a shortage is the will to run these type of people who are dynamic. They are women and they're intersectional and they are revolutionary in the sense that they are going to do things to actually help women across all brackets, income brackets.